Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. We'll just wait 20 or 30 seconds before we kick it off here. We had around 800 registrations, so we'll just give people another brief moment to join us. Good afternoon, good morning, greetings wherever you are across North America or around the world. Thank you so much for joining us for our annual Traveller Segments edition. It's one of our special custom quarterly editions of the State of the American Traveller. We've been working with our very good friends at Future Partners for 20 years, and we've been looking over recent years at specific types and segments of travelers that are of particular interest. And we've got four really, I think, impactful traveler segments to dive into today. I'm delighted to be joined by our very good friend and an advisor to many of you, President and CEO Erin Francis Cummings of Future Partners. Erin's going to be jumping into the research here in a moment. And then one of the traveller segments we're diving into in some depth is our sports event travellers. And we're delighted to be joined by Andrew Wilson, who's Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Discover Atlanta. He's been with Atlanta for many years, leading their marketing efforts, including a whole bunch of awards. But Andrew also brings experience from around the world. He's lived on 4 continents, and we're going to be talking about a global event, the Soccer World Cup, as one of those marquee sporting events that we can leverage. So Andrew will be joining us after the research presentation. So you can see the lineup we've got today. The 4 segments are, first of all, wellness. So that's people seeking health and fitness. And that's not just going to spas, that's integrating wellness into every aspect of the travel experience. Generation Z. So those are younger travelers. We've been looking at them over many years. In fact, we were looking back at some of the research from more than a decade ago. How have they evolved? What are some of their opportunities and challenges? We're going to be diving into dual income and no kids and comparing so-called dinks with families. Where are their strengths and weaknesses? And then finally, we'll be having a look at event travelers, particularly the 2 most impactful types of event travelers, sports and music. And then we're going to be diving in particular into sporting events, having a look at what Discover Atlanta's doing, what they're doing around the FIFA Soccer World Cup, what are they doing with signature local events of other types, and they've really got some innovative examples to share. So please ask questions of Erin, Andrew, or myself. All the resources from today are going to be shared out in an email 24 hours after the webinar. Plus, we've got a landing page. Plus, you can visit Future Partners' website for the slides, a copy of the webinar recording, and a whole range of other resources. So without further ado, let me pass it over to you, Erin, to dive into the 4 traveller segments.
Hey, well, thank you for the nice introduction, Chris. You're also giving away our ages here. But yes, we have proudly worked with Miles for 2 decades. If you've just joined us, again, thank you for being here. I'm Erin Francis Cummings, President and CEO of Future Partners, a company formerly known as Destination Analysts. We are a creative insights firm shaping winning strategies for travel, tourism, and hospitality leaders that capture them hearts, minds, and market share and bring the future of travel within reach. It's my great pleasure to present the latest travel segments edition of the State of the American Traveler Study. That's our ongoing research that looks into how Americans are considering, experiencing, and consuming travel, which we've conducted since 2006. It is a monthly tracking survey of a representative sample of adult American travelers across the United States. We collect 4,000 unique completed surveys each month. The findings that I'm presenting to you are about 3 weeks old, collected between August 16th and 28th. The confidence interval of the top line findings is plus or minus 1.55%. And the data is weighted to reflect the actual population of travelers in the US. So the deep dives that we are taking a look into today, I'm actually going to start with our demographic profiles, our Gen Zs, and then our Dinks, and then move into our more psychographic or behaviorally defined segments, our wellness seekers and our sports and music event travelers. And for each segment, I'm going to share a video of an interview with a traveler or travelers who represent that segment. So let's start with our Gen Z. And let me share first a video of Gen Z travelers.
I would say it's definitely a type B person, which means it's very disorganized. It's very wake up and go. It's very unplanned. It's very just living life on the edge. Yeah, sometimes I wake up and I see a video about a state or about a country and immediately I want to go. So I'm going to start looking up flights. It's also very disorganized. I really just go and maybe find stuff to do through online resources or like videos of other people. So yeah, it's never really planned out. It's really a type B personality type of travel life. A hidden gem moment when I'm traveling is I love to find cool little local thrifting shops, cool coffee shops, little cafes, libraries. One of my biggest ones would be finding something that you wouldn't expect to be in that state or in that country. So like, for example, if I'm in Idaho, I'd find somewhere to jet ski because nobody expects you to jet ski in Idaho. I like to find stuff that people would not expect. If my trip was a highlight video, the opening scene would definitely be like a quick 5-second rundown of a lot of the photos I took, but they're gonna go according to a ticking beat and each photo is on a beat, if that makes sense. And it's gonna be like, it's gonna feel like a countdown to the actual video. And then my closing scene would definitely be me at the airport, tired, with my luggages, my very interesting outfit, my pajamas on, bonnet on. My closing scene will probably have something of me being like, I want to go home. I'm so ready to leave.
All right, I will share. I am a little biased with love for Gen Z because my children are technically Gen Z. So anyway, let's start with some notable demographic characteristics of this generation. When asked how they personally identify, Gen Z travelers are far more likely to identify as LGBTQIA+ relative to other generations at 14.7%. Ethnic diversity is another defining trait of Gen Z travelers. Our data shows they are the most racially diverse traveling generation at 44.6%, identifying as non-Caucasian. And an important reality shaping how they travel is the youngest of the generations that we focus on. Their average household incomes are well behind that of older generations. They are also the most likely to report having or traveling with someone who has a disability that affects their trips. And I think these demographics are a reminder about inclusivity, economic identity, and that inclusivity in messaging may not be seen as optional for Gen Z. So for each of these segments, starting again with Gen Z, we'll look at their financial and travel outlook, their travel behavior and preferences, and some marketing insights. So the financial and travel outlook for Gen Z, how they feel about their financial situations now versus a year ago. Gen Z and millennials actually track closely. 42% of Gen Z actually feeling like their financial situation has improved. When asked to project ahead, Gen Z is amongst the most hopeful about their financial future at 58.9%, expecting improvement in their household income a year from now, suggesting potential for growth in their travel spending. We asked if they are cutting back due to fears of a recession, and Gen Z stands out as the most cautious at 54.7%. In fact, nearly 1/3 said that economic concerns have directly led them to reduce or reconsider their travel plans for the next 6 months. That's more than any other generation. Gen Z is also the most likely to downgrade their travel modes. 23.2% report shifting from flights to road travel in order to cut costs. And even more telling, Gen Z is more likely to say they've outright canceled travel due to financial strain at 13.7%, more than twice the rate of boomers reporting doing the same. When we ask if now is a good time to spend on leisure travel, 36.5% of Gen Z travelers said yes, a little bit behind millennials. But despite a dip in 2025, Gen Z financial sentiment is actually improving, and that's possibly a signal for us about travel interests and their marketability. But travel isn't at the very top of their budget priorities right now. So when asked where they'll focus spending in the next 3 months, Gen Z ranks travel lower than any other generation, and they're quite behind millennials in that actually. And this sentiment in particular dipped even further in Q3 this year, suggesting that any marketing push targeting Gen Z likely needs to focus on value and affordability. When asked to share their total expected leisure travel spend over the next year, as you might expect, Gen Z annual budgets are substantially lower than the older generations. They're at $3,876. And while other groups reported increasing their travel budgets year over year, Gen Z remains mostly flat. So let's look at their travel behavior and preferences. When we asked if they plan to travel more in the coming year, 30.8% of Gen Z said yes, but that still slightly trails millennials. Their average number of trips also falls behind other generations at 3.5 expected leisure trips in the next year. That said, Gen Z's average expected trip volume has grown by 0.2 in the last year. When it comes to their trip decisions, Gen Z, they're more likely to factor shopping in at 28.3%, and that's twice the rate of baby boomers. But travel costs have deterred them from traveling as much as they would have otherwise preferred, with 42.1% citing that as a deterrent. That's 5 points higher than millennials and more than 20 points higher than baby boomers. Gen Z also has less time off to spare for travel. 23.2% said that limited time off kept them from traveling. Their trip planning window is significantly shorter relative to other generations, and you saw that in the, the video that I just shared with you. They are averaging 9.2 weeks out for planning from a week-long domestic vacation. And getting into their mindset, when asked how satisfied they are with their lives right now, only 62.4% of Gen Z said they are satisfied, and that's the lowest of any generation in the survey. And they are most likely to feel stressed on a regular basis. 50.3% of Gen Z report frequent or elevated stress levels compared to just 16.3% of boomers. This may lead them to be less adventurous than millennials while traveling. Only 44.9% consider themselves adventurous travelers, and also less likely to take spontaneous trips compared to millennials, although nearly a quarter do say they take spontaneous trips with frequency. In looking at the domestic destinations they have highest on their radars, Gen Z stands out for Los Angeles making their top 5. And for international, Japan is number 1 with Gen Z. All right, so let's look at marketing travel to Gen Z from a resource perspective. No surprise, Instagram and TikTok are their top marketing channels for travel inspiration at about 40% each. And as the social first generation, they are most inclined to utilize social media for travel planning as well. The majority of Gen Z use online videos specifically for their trip planning. And as such, they are significantly more likely than their older counterparts to turn to digital influencers to plan their travel at 38.4%. But this is actually down slightly year over year. Gen Z still is lagging behind millennials in podcast consumption. They're at 44%, but that is a 6-point increase from the last year. So that is a trend worth watching. They are more likely to prefer podcasts about health and fitness and pop culture, as well as comedy, gaming, film, and TV. So in summary, Gen Z is diverse, obviously digitally native, financially cautious. They have shorter booking windows, which requires more agile marketing from you all, and video and influencer content shape their decisions, as well as stress relief and shopping being top motivators. All right, let's now look at our dual income no kids segment, otherwise known as DINKs. These are defined in our research as being married or partnered and not parents to school age children and not of the baby boomer generation. So let's hear from our DINKs about how they travel.
I would describe it as fun-loving, energetic, thoughtful, looking for connection and good conversations, good food. A hidden gem moment for me is really the type of experience that not a lot of people are able to attain, something unplanned and unknown that you can't find on Google or Yelp, something you stumble upon because of happenstance. In my trips highlight reel, the opening shot would likely be the plane taking off, a shot through the airplane's window, likely leading into an MTV Cribs style walkthrough of the nice hotel that we would likely be staying at, ending with a shot of the balcony or the exterior of said hotel room. The closing shot would likely be either a relaxing sunset or an action-packed adventure, something like whitewater rafting.
All right, so DINKs make up 15.4% of American leisure travelers. 34.3% of DINKs report household incomes over $125,000 annually, compared to just 30.3% of family travelers. And just a reminder, we'll be comparing DINKs to family travelers in this section. So while many assume DINKs live in cities, our data shows that 52.7% actually live in suburban areas, with just 22.6% in urban centers. So we'll look through DINK's financial and travel outlook, travel behavior and preferences, and finally some marketing insights. Okay, starting with their financial outlook. DINKs are less likely to cite financial shifts, for better or for worse. 43.5% say their financial situation hasn't changed relative to a year ago. That's 10 points higher than family travelers. The same holds for their financial outlook, with 41.6% feeling their financial situation is going to remain the same in the next year. That's 15 points behind family travelers in terms of financial optimism. They're less likely to be financially cautious in the face of a recession. Just 45.7% of DINKs said they are currently being cautious with their spending due to recession concerns. That's 6 points behind family travelers. Thus, they're less likely to be changing their travel behavior due to concerns of an economic recession. 2/3 of DINKs said they have made no changes to travel plans due to economic concerns. However, they are less inclined to say that now is a good time to spend on travel, and they're much less likely to prioritize travel spending right now as well. Their annual average leisure travel budgets are at $6,253. That's well above average, but slightly lower than family travelers. So let's look more deeply at their travel behavior and preferences. Likely in part related to their financial outlook, DINKs are less likely to say they will travel more in the next year at just 23.2%, expecting higher trip volume. Similarly, less inclined to say they will spend more on travel in the next year compared to the past year at 27.5%. Their expected leisure trip volume is on par with family travelers at 3.8 leisure trips expected in the next 12 months. Perhaps amongst the most interesting things about this segment for travel marketers, DINKs will avoid peak season travel, with 41.6% saying they prefer to travel during off seasons. However, as you craft your marketing strategies, particularly for targeting DINKs or off-season travel, do note that this segment is less adventurous. They are less adventurous travelers. Perhaps as such, they are significantly less likely to take spontaneous trips, especially relative to family travelers. They're also less likely to feel stressed on the day-to-day. So that may not need to lead messaging as it has to with Gen Z. And their top destinations, they largely focus on coastal when it comes to domestic, and when it comes to international, North America, UK, and Europe. So how to market to dinks? They are more receptive to marketing on online search and review sites and less so on social media. In fact, nearly half do not use social to plan their trips. This makes them less likely to use digital influencers and online video as well. They're also less likely to use travel agents. And do know that over 1 in 3 of them are podcast listeners, but that does fall quite behind family travelers. And when it comes to content, they are more likely to tune into news and true crime. So really that more informative and story driven. So in summary, dinks are financially stable, but cautious on spending, not really driven by urgency or spontaneity. Off-season is a real sweet spot for them, and they're more research-heavy, logic-first planners with reliance on search and reviews rather than social media and influencers. All right, let's now get into our wellness travelers, and let's hear from some of them first.
So if my travel style was a personality, I would call it curious classy, because I want to do kind of some fun, quirky, curious things wherever I'm going that are slightly off the beaten path and unique. But at the same time, I want to keep things kind of classy, easy, not too rugged, with a touch of kind of style and elegance. So I'm not interested in roughing it or doing anything extreme. I always want to kind of have a comfortable home base to come back to.
Hidden gem moment for me would be something spontaneous and random, something that I did not expect when I was traveling. And so I think that can involve meeting someone there locally. Maybe they suggest something to do that's different, nobody knows about, maybe some food that no one knows about, or, or like a restaurant or something. But basically, it's a moment that I feel really lucky happened to me, definitely unexpected, and made it really worth my time.
Food would definitely be the opening and closing shot, because much of when I travel is focused on finding the best restaurants or finding unique and exciting restaurants in an area at all price points. So I'm definitely food focused and food motivated, and that's how I would start and bookend a trip in terms of what were the best things I ate.
Okay, so about 3 in 10 American travelers identify as wellness seekers. Wellness seekers tend to be younger, so more than half are Gen Z or millennials. Wellness seekers are more likely to be urban dwellers, with 39.6% being large city residents. Wellness seekers skew more ethnically diverse, 29.1% identifying as a non-Caucasian identity. And when it comes to their travel spending potential, they're more likely to be high income earners, with 28% having household income of $150,000 or more. Wellness seekers have varied interests that take them outside of the everyday. The segment index is high for passions like culinary, international, historical, shopping, as well as concert travel, suggesting they're looking for more than just rest. They really want purpose-driven trips. And I think you heard that in the video that I shared with you just now. Okay, so let's take a look at their financial and travel outlook. They are in a better financial situation now than a year ago, 46.2% reporting that. That's 20 points ahead of other travelers. They also exhibit notably higher optimism about their financial future at 59.5%. Nearly 2/3 of them say they will still invest in travel, even in a recessionary period. They are less likely to reduce their travel or trip behaviors because of economic concerns. They are also more inclined to spend on leisure travel right now at 45.8%. That it's a good time for them to spend money on travel. They're also more likely to prioritize travel spending in the future. That's 70.5% saying they are making travel a budget priority in the next 3 months. And they have higher expected annual travel spending compared to the typical American traveler at $6,602. In the next year, wellness seekers anticipate taking more trips than the previous year. In terms of trip volume, they plan to take 4.1 leisure trips. That's 0.6 trips higher than other travelers. Interestingly, wellness seekers are more likely than other travelers to prefer peak season travel. And unlike the other segments you've looked at so far today, the majority of them consider themselves adventurous travelers. And in terms of their mindsets, while 8 in 10 are satisfied with their life right now, they are more likely to feel stressed in their day-to-day lives relative to other travelers. Thus, they see travel as playing a key role in their well-being, with 81.9% saying it's important that their travel supports their physical, mental, or spiritual well-being. That's more than 20 points higher than other travelers. And for marketing travel, nearly 1/3 say they frequently take spontaneous leisure trips. In terms of where they're looking at domestically, New York, Florida, Las Vegas, California, Miami, and internationally, Italy, Canada, France, UK, Japan. Ending with some marketing insights, market to wellness seekers on social media and podcasts. Instagram is a key platform, followed very closely by YouTube and Facebook. As such, wellness seekers are quite likely to turn to digital influencers and online video for trip planning at 51.7%. Half of wellness seekers are tuned into podcasts regularly, and they gravitate towards health and fitness, travel, tech, and business podcasts. So in summary, wellness seekers, younger, diverse, wellness obsessed, financially optimistic, and resilient. Travel is a core part of their self-care. They're peak season travelers open to adventure, and multi-channel marketing is going to be essential to drawing them in. And for our final traveler segment, the sports and music event traveler. These are travelers who have recently taken a trip specifically to attend a special event or sporting event. So let's hear from them.
If I'm traveling for an event, definitely the number one priority is the seat at the event. I'm not going to go too far for an event with poor seats, so definitely need the VIP access or just preferred seating. If I'm going to an event in a new city, I would say the pre-party event would be finding a great restaurant that I've always wanted to go to. I have a short list of restaurants across the US and abroad. So definitely fueling up with some good food and some cocktails, if you will. The opening shot would definitely be a video or picture of maybe the food I'm having leading up to the event. And then the closing shot would be definitely a sneak peek of the sweet seats that I have at the event. Maybe my favorite song or a play of some kind if it's a sporting event.
Well, more than half of American travelers are sports and music event travelers. So this is really more mainstream than a niche. And these travelers tend to skew Gen X and younger. They're most likely to reside in the suburbs, but have a higher urban concentration relative to other travelers. In addition to sports and music, they're more likely than other travelers to be passionate about shopping, theme parks, fitness, wine, and nightlife. So getting into their financial and travel outlook. They feel like they're in a better financial situation now compared to last year. They have higher financial optimism. Whopping 61.4% feel travel is a worthwhile investment, even in a recession. But they're more likely to actually adjust how they choose and buy travel when faced with economic pressures, from choosing more affordable destinations to using their rewards to save money. This segment is more inclined to spend on leisure travel right now and to prioritize travel spending in their near-term budgets. And they have a travel budget of $6,389, as you can see, well above other travelers. They anticipate taking more trips in the coming year than the last, at 31.7%. In terms of trip volume, they expect to take 4.2 leisure trips in the next year. 43% consider themselves adventurous travelers. That's nearly 20 points higher than average. And they are 3 times as likely as the typical traveler to take spontaneous leisure trips. In terms of marketing to them, they are more receptive to travel marketing on social media and podcasts. They are likely to plan their trips using video-led social media platforms, and thus turn to digital influencers for trip planning, and of course, online video even more so. 42.8% tune into podcasts, with health, fitness, and sports, of course, making their top 3 most consumed content types. So to end here, let's shift into World Cup. About 2/3 of American travelers are aware of the upcoming World Cup hosted in North America. I'm sorry, I should say 2/3 of our sports and music event travelers are aware of the upcoming World Cup being hosted on our continent. Over 28% are interested in traveling to a World Cup event at this time. And if we expand globally, and this comes from the State of the International Traveler Study, just over half of the 16,000 international travelers we studied in January said they'd be interested in visiting the US specifically for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. That is highest, as you can see here on the right of your screen, in India, Brazil, China, Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia. And in terms of the number of days these markets are anticipating spending on a trip specifically to the US for the FIFA World Cup, our Latin American markets are reporting they spend the most days in the US for a trip for that. And in terms of travel party size, our potential visitors from India reporting the largest travel party size for a FIFA World Cup trip to the US, followed by visitors from Colombia and Mexico. And with that, I will turn this over back to Chris and our esteemed guest, Andrew Wilson from Atlanta. If you like or found something more interesting what you saw, you are welcome to sign up for your demo and free trial of the State of the American Traveler Insights Explorer. There's a QR code on your screen right now for you to do that. And thank you so much. You can always follow us on social for more ongoing insights. Chris, Andrew, to you.
A lot, Erin, and I'll invite Andrew in a moment. Why don't we just ask the audience out there, first of all, a reminder to ask Erin, Andrew, or myself any questions in the Q&A. And let's pull up a survey question here. Of the 4 traveler segments that Erin presented, and obviously you may have a whole bunch of traveler segments you're prioritizing, but amongst these 4, which 2 are most exciting to you? So which of these 4 segments, which top 2 do you think you're likely to put the most marketing resource, time, or other effort into targeting and prioritizing in 2026? We'll just give you another few seconds. Okay, let's have a quick look at the results. Okay, so you can see dual income, no kids, Erin, are of particular interest, followed closely by wellness, and then sports and music event travelers that we'll be diving into in a moment. And Gen Z trails the pack, but interesting to see that there's some level of interest and support for all of those four. Okay, so just to set up our discussion with Andrew, sporting events is a $65 billion segment of the travel market in the US, estimated to be over $500 billion globally. The average visitor, these stats come from a big study that Expedia did across 8 countries earlier this year, launched in April, just under $1,600 per person. They actually looked at sport travelers in 8 countries, including the US, Canada, Japan, the UK, Germany, etc. And you can see the breakdown here of where they're spending their money. Less than 20% of the expenditure is actually on the event ticket, with lots of money left over, approaching 60% for the accommodation and activities. And those activities are obviously critical. There's also a very strong interest to get out, as you can see in this next research slide, to visit destinations, that third stat down. They over 8 out of 10 of sport event travelers are visiting not just the location, the city, the county of the sports event itself, but they're getting out and traveling beyond that destination to go to other cities, counties, etc. And that's obviously a key thing for something like the Soccer World Cup, where people are coming for an extended time. So in terms of their passions, we saw some of this in the stats that Erin presented. We had a quick look at sports travelers specifically. You saw the importance of food and cuisine, history. Now, international travel is at an all-time high in terms of Americans traveling overseas. Sport events could be one way to get them to consider spending another trip in the United States, going to a sporting event and traveling around that sporting event rather than heading off to Europe for the 5th, 6th, 7th time. And music events also a passion. So think about that whole sort of ecosystem that is a critical part. Now, if we have a quick look at Atlanta, that I'm going to ask Andrew to introduce more fully. Atlanta is one of the top sporting cities in the country amongst all US travelers, 41%. The average for all US travelers is 27%, but over 4 out of 10 of recent or likely Atlanta visitors in the latest State of the American Traveler research, so that's full year data up to August 2025, have been to a sporting event in the past 12 months. And if we look at all the top 10 cities, Atlanta is up there with these other iconic cities. But it's surprising, there's actually a tremendous sort of competition in this top 10 with very little difference between the first, the 10th, or even down to the 15th. So lots of competition in the sporting event space. So without further ado, Andrew, can you just briefly introduce sports and sporting events and how Atlanta thinks about it, how it fits into your overall approach to conventions, events, meetings, etc.?
Sure. Can you throw up that slide I gave you, just to give the audience some perspective? So Atlanta's home to 4 major league franchises, the NFL, MLB, NBA, and MLS. What sets Atlanta apart from a lot of destinations is the fact that we've got 3 of those franchises headquartered, and their stadium facilities are in the downtown core, actually on our convention and entertainment campus, right adjacent to the convention center. And you see here in this picture, the park in the foreground is Centennial Olympic Park, which was a great legacy of the 1996 Olympics that we hosted. Around that park are the must-see attractions in Atlanta, including the Georgia Aquarium, which receives more than 3 million visitors a year, college football Hall of Fame, the National Center for Civil Human Rights, the Skyview, and the World Coca-Cola. So sports is really big business for the city. It is an important part of the kind of business that we go after and fit into the mix of convention. But it's not just about sports, it's also about entertainment. Those venues, those sporting venues, double up as entertainment venues, as they do in most cities. And so we, being a major city in the southeast, we get typically, we had like a 4-day Beyonce concert series. We get Taylor Swift. We get the big names come to Atlanta because the promoters know that they can attract people from around the region. And we have 13,000 hotel rooms supporting this downtown convention and entertainment industry, with over 300 restaurants as well. Another factor that plays into Atlanta's sort of positioning in the sports, in the national and global sports league, is accessibility. We have the world's busiest airport, but what that really translates to is that about 80% of the US population is within 2 hours flying time of Atlanta, and we have almost 200 direct flights from international locations as well, which means that if you're going to have a big event here, people can get to it, and so attendance is virtually guaranteed.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So who are your partners when we're thinking about the sporting event sort of ecosystem? Who do you work with in executing to attract and maximize the benefits from sporting events? And what's your advice to destination organizations about, what are the effective and important partnerships they need to think about building in their own destination and community?
Well, it's a team effort to pick up on the sports metaphor. I mean, it really is. It's a complex balancing act between managing venue utilizations against the hotel availability and the conventions center activity. What we're trying to do is to maximize everybody's capital utilization. It's pointless attracting a big sporting event concurrent with a very major citywide convention if then people can't get the hotel rooms. It's great to drive demand for sure by overbooking the city, but it gets to a point of frustration if you can't make the attendance goal expectations of the meeting planners or the promoters because people simply can't get a hotel room. So it's Atlanta's a very hospitality community is highly collaborative. We have to approach almost every large piece of business with a partnership philosophy, where we talking to the venues who have obviously the economic incentive to fill their venues all the time, but we're also talking to the hotels to understand the balance of their in-house business versus the need to have some blocks for conventions or set aside rooms for a major event. And one of the things that we do that I think has been a hallmark of our success is when we go on the road to trade shows or events to sell the city, the destination, to on a B2B basis, on the professional level, we travel with our partners. So we take our venues with us, we take our hotels with us to those events, and we represent in an agnostic way the destination, but we have on hand the expertise of a particular partner available to talk to a potential client.
So before we dive into the big marquee sporting events in a little bit more detail, including the Soccer World Cup, signature local events is something we've looked at over recent years. And so those are events that typically happen on a regular basis, just in one location, are uniquely sort of connected and telling the story of that destination in some way. So can you share Atlanta's approach to how you support and nurture and facilitate these sort of signature local events, including sporting events?
Yeah, I think what we've done is we see this as in the continuum of big festivals, signature festivals, or signature annual or biannual conventions that that many cities have. And so to that end, we've tried to develop some signature sporting events that were very strategic in trying to place these events at time periods where there was lower occupancy on the hotel calendars, right? And so an example of that is this Cricket Celebration Bowl, nothing to do with cricket. It's the championship game of the HBCUs in collegiate football. And it takes place on December 13th this year. And
So that's the historically black colleges.
yes. And this was an event one of our board members of the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau championed and pulled together with the support of the community, because December is a pretty slow month has been historically a slow month for the city. And this has been very successful. It's been running now for 10 years, and it puts a nice piece of business right in a sweet spot where we needed it. Another example is an event that was in existence. Well, I think 1968 it started. It's one of the collegiate bowls, but our sports council secured a very significant sponsorship with Chick-fil-A. And back in 2006, 2007, this game had not been very highly attended. It wasn't really on the top of the list for collegiate bowl games. But because of the influx of sponsorship money that was allowed us to become in 2007, I think the second most attended bowl after the Rose Bowl, and it's held up there ever since. And again, that was by design, because that first week of January has been a historically softer period of time for the hotel occupancy. But it's not just about sporting events. We also, within the ACVB, we developed a film festival. I think I got a slide that shows that. Yeah, under the leadership of my CEO, William Pate, and Kathleen Bertrand, one of our senior vice presidents, they developed a film festival. And we incubated it until it became self-sustaining, and then we span it off as a standalone event. And Kathleen left the organization to be the executive chair of that event. And that's been, an example that is, in terms of development, much like Austin had with Austin City Limits and South by Southwest. These kind of events are important because they're fillers in a calendar that can have ups and downs in occupancy. Other big sporting local events on our calendar, we have the Big South National Qualifier, which is a youth volleyball tournament that brings in an incredible number of volleyball players and their families, and it's the hotels is absolutely packed during that event. We have the Cheer Sport Nationals, again, not a big marquee sporting event, but it's a regular for us, a competitive cheerleading competition, and the city is just awash with cheerleaders and their families. We have this SEC football championship game early in December. That one has been producing for us like crazy. We have the AFLAC kickoff games on Labor Day weekend. This year we had 2 kickoff games on a very crowded weekend. And you know, I can go on. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
big sporting city, so
Yeah.
we have them. But we nurture these as we do nurture our convention clients that are annuals or biannual events. You know, they're very important to us.
Yeah, I'll actually put in the chat, Andrew. There was a fascinating article in The Economist that came out yesterday about the explosion of smaller sports that are getting attention and venture capital money. Everything from volleyball, for example, the new Nations Cup has seen an explosion in terms of viewership with all sorts of the streaming platforms. There's all sorts of ways that people can engage with what used to be sort of secondary and tertiary sports, through to lacrosse, through to new sports that have just been made up, including apparently tag is now a big thing in the streaming environment as well as live. So we're going to talk about major sporting events, including the FIFA Soccer World Cup. But can you briefly describe how Atlanta and how you think other destinations should think about these big marquee events? Because obviously they bring lots of positives and benefits. They're often, you know, there's often very significant sort of boosterism around the benefits. But what are some of the challenges, and how should destinations think about the pros and cons of these marquee events?
Well, on the positive side, of course, these events bring a lot of prestige and put cities on an international stage, showcasing everything you have to offer. You know, usually during the broadcasting of the events, they cut to destination B-roll, and they generally present the city in a very positive light. So they're super important from that. They also bring new visitors to the city that probably would not have visited had it not been for the draw of the event, for the sport or the artists that they're passionate about. And I think probably most important for me is that these events often act as a catalyst for development in the community, whether it's hotels renovations, new hotels. In fact, you know, Atlanta has a $5 billion development going up right next to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, called Centennial Yards, and it's going to have 2 hotels, an entertainment facility, several apartment buildings, and many restaurants. And that, I think, got a lot of momentum when the FIFA World Cup was, as a host city, was announced. It helped shake some money out of the trees to get that project underway. And more importantly, it actually accelerated the timetable for getting some of the hotels online in anticipation for the World Cup. Now, the challenges with these events are that they exact a much higher cost on a city than non-major events, often with the same attendance. So, you know, there are only so many people you can squeeze into a city or into a venue for a Super Bowl, for example. You can squeeze as many, if not more, of those people into a convention center for a big citywide convention. But the cost of attracting a Super Bowl is significant. And then there's the side effects of establishing clean zones, security cordons around the facilities. There's a displacement of previously booked business because, for example, in Atlanta, we have a book of business of conventions that go out more than 10 years from now. So within that booking period, we might suddenly get an opportunity to host a major sporting event. And when we look at the convention calendar, we suddenly find that the campus is occupied. So then it's a challenge. Do we then turn down the major sporting event and all the positives that it can bring, you know, or displace some really good business that didn't cost us a lot of money to be there? So I think that's one of the most significant challenges. Now, there's the other challenge is that there's a destination risk that comes about being on a global stage. These big events attract crazies, terrorism. Think of the '96 Olympics and the bombing that took place there. Nature is unpredictable as well. We've had an ice storm during a Super Bowl. We had a tornado during a Final Four. You cannot anticipate these. These were very uncharacteristic out-of-season events for us, but they had a long-lasting negative perception impact on the destination. So I think, whereas the net impact of major sporting events is positive, for sure.
So let's
believe
quickly move on.
Not as high as it's claimed to be.
Yeah, just in the few minutes we've got left, and we've got 5 minutes to the top of the hour. The FIFA World Cup, you're one of 11 host cities in the US. It's, of course, being hosted in Canada and Mexico. There's 108 games in the US. You're hosting 8, including a semi-final. There's going to be training camps in other cities, potentially up to, another 20 or 30 cities could be involved in training camps. So how are you thinking about the World Cup? And you've got an innovative approach to driving wider economic and community benefits from the tournament. Do you want to briefly speak about that and some of the specific sort of innovative steps you've taken?
Yeah, this is going to be like having literally 8 Super Bowls in terms of the impact on us. And, the city is being essentially impacted over an entire month for this. Now, one of the things that our mayor has been very intentional about is not having the World Cup happen to us. It has to happen with us. And to that end, he established an initiative called Showcase Atlanta that is a public-private partnership. It's a standalone organization, nonprofit, set up with 2 business leaders, the CEO of UPS and Arthur Blank, who is the founder of one of the founders of Home Depot, as the chair of Showcase. And the mission of Showcase is to ensure, to help the local business community participate economically in the World Cup. We've been helping Showcase by developing some technology platform to underpin them so that small businesses can register themselves in sort of like a business network, because when the FIFA comes into town and they need businesses, whether it's transportation or they need somebody, a florist for a special event, they can go to this directory that we've helped Showcase establish, where businesses, and particularly focus on the minority-owned businesses within this platform. So that's one of the things that we're doing within Atlanta to try and help the community benefit better. Now, Showcase has also been involved in working with Airbnb on developing an Airbnb Academy. One of the things that I saw in the 2010 World Cup that took place in South Africa was expectations were set very high that people could put their house on up for short-term rental, and that they were just going to make a lot of money out of it. And that did not transpire. But unfortunately, the expectations were so high that the people in the communities invested very heavily on trying to bring their houses or rooms up to a standard, and then they didn't get the demand that they had been promised. So I think this academy with Airbnb is going to be really helpful for managing those expectations and also helping guide local entrepreneurs and hosts as to how to basically be a good host. And one of the important things we're going to have to do is get the word out to drive people into the suburbs, into the neighborhoods, so that those people who are making themselves hosts can actually benefit and enjoy that. And that's one of our challenges, is to communicate the broader destination benefits, not just the core downtown area around the stadium.
Thank you, Andrew. And I put in the chat a link to both Showcase Atlanta and a news release from Airbnb on how they're helping as part of this. It's a first in its kind initiative anywhere in the world. And we've unfortunately run out of time, so we're going to have to thank you, Andrew. We'll have to thank Erin. Thanks so much for bringing those research insights. Thanks, Andrew, for bringing your expertise. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll be sharing the resources from the webinar today, tomorrow, and please join us in our next and final quarterly webinar. Oh, I just mentioned there's an esports article that's available, a white paper. We'll be publishing a white paper on sports events travel later in the month as well. And then in terms of upcoming resources, the Destination Management or Sustainability and Stewardship edition of the State of the American Traveller. Join us on November the 18th for a close look at community engagement. And we'll have speakers from across North America and Europe to dive into a topic that we've looked at previously. So thank you to everybody. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you soon.